Hi everybody. This is the first video I've ever done for YouTube, but I've seen a lot of questions out there about how to magnetize the Kastelan robots. So I wanted to throw this out there as a method that I used. You can see that this guy, I've basically just taken stock arms and attached magnets to the ends. What I like to do when I magnetize is I set up one arm, I'll glue it together with the magnet, and I'll use that arm as an index, right? So that one becomes my reference for everything else, right? That way, I can take this and I can glue this right here. I know that I'm going to have the same pole of the magnet facing off of the end of every arm, and the way that I do that is I set up the other end, right? And then I've got this. I can't possibly touch there, so I'm ready to glue it onto a separate arm. The way that I went about magnetizing this specific model, you see there's this widening on the stock arm right here that's meant to go inside the two halves of this fist, or this gun, right where it goes together. There's a hole there, and that's meant to go in there so that you can attach the hand so that it can rotate on the end of the wrist. You can, affix it with glue, or you could just leave it loose if you wanted to, so that you've actually got a rotating wrist joint that you could position any way you like. I don't know how well that's going to work after the primer and the paint go on, but it's a thing you could do. So what I did was I had some larger magnets that turned out not to be the best fit. They were just slightly too much larger than this piece, and there's a very tight tolerance inside of the fists. You can see inside of this fist I've got a magnet right there, and it is loose enough in there so that it moves around when it's up against the magnet, but it also is close enough to there that it forms a tight seal. And you can actually kind of tilt it a little bit. You can get some wrist motion on there. Get a bit of a go-go gadget arm going on there, right? But I found that this is a useful method for not screwing up what goes where, because once I've got this fist set up, then I can set up the other fist. And I discovered that there's quite a large void. If you look at, I've got the manual right here for putting these guys together. Inside of the fist, right, there's only basically a slot, a circular slot that magnet can go in. But inside of the gun, there's a much larger void that goes all the way to the front of the weapon, right? And because of that, you can actually just drop the magnet in there. You can see it's basically all the way down at the bottom, and it will attach anywhere you want to put it, and it will align itself wherever you want to connect it, right? But so this is obviously a left gun, but you can see that magnet drop all the way down to there when it's not needed, and when it is, you just line it up, and there it is, right? So you've got your two guns there, or your two fists, or whatever, and you know that you're going to be able to attach those pieces to both robots, right? Because I've got the other guy set up the same way. So I don't need to worry about, having the right guns with the right robot or the right fists with the right robot. I know that those are going to line up. I do the same thing with my Space Marines when I put those guys together with magnets. I don't usually magnetize except in, specific special weapon circumstances, right? But I have this reference arm that I've been utilizing, and then I just basically treated this mount point for the shoulder-mounted gun as a torso. So I would normally, put a hole in the torso. I drilled this hole. The magnets that I'm using, in case you want to actually source your own for the big magnets, are 4.75 millimeter rare earth magnets from Mata FX that I got at Modelbahn Op, a great model shop in Boyertown, Pennsylvania. And I've also got some 2mm ones, which are the ones that I normally utilize. This, you'll notice it says, these both say booster pack, and the reason for that is that the starter pack actually comes with the drill bit that you need. This perfectly matches the diameter of the magnets themselves when you line it up, which I'm not doing very well right now. But purchased basically a pin vise, right? So I held this in place. The post is already there, and on the weapons, once you assemble them with the ammo case or the tank on the side, the hole is there, right? And those line up. So basically, all I did was use those as an index point and put a magnet behind each of those, right? So I put that hole in there, drilled it in there. I did not have it mounted at the time. I basically just held it in my fingers and, you know, did it very carefully. And then insert that. I usually use Model Master plastic cement when I'm gluing Games Workshop plastic parts together. It works really well. The only caveat is that it can cause, I unfortunately had some smeared on my thumb, and I got it on this armor panel here. You can see that's a little roughed up because it is a solvent. It dissolves the plastic and lets it weld to the other plastic, right? So I usually use that when I put a magnet into something like this, or into this guy's arm right there. And it tends to do pretty well. I've had a couple pull out, which is obviously annoying, but very small number of them considering. So, and I basically did the same thing here. Once you have that indexed, right, you know that this ends the arm and that ends the other thing, or the gun, right? So now I know I'm going to be able to attach this, and it's going to mix and match with, you know, the other guns that I set up for this guy. I'm going to be able to pull that off. I'm going to be able to put this on, or the other gun for the other guy. Or if I get a third one or fourth one, same thing, right? And then once that's removed, attach that back there so I don't lose those magnets. Another handy thing for that is, you know, the magnets aren't going to roll anywhere because they're attached to this arm, right? Otherwise, they'd be all over the table. So the post probably does most of the job of holding this there, but you don't want to count on that on the tabletop when you're picking stuff up, moving it around. So, you know, you basically can just pop that off, put that right down there, and then, you know, you got your fists on, you're ready to go. You're ready to rock and roll, run across the table and mess some stuff up, right? One note about surface mounting magnets, particularly large magnets. The plastic stuff doesn't work very well. It's really for attaching plastic to plastic, right? The reason that it works well on, you know, the small holes for these 2mm magnets is because the size of the hole, you basically put the stuff in there and it melts around there. It creates a pretty airtight seal, right? That's not something you can count on if you're surface mounting magnets like I did here. I glued there. What I basically did is I took some zip kicker. This just speeds it up, right? And I painted a little bit of zip kicker on there. I put a dollop of glue on the end of an entire stack of magnets, right? Still indexed with the fist on the other end, so I knew which end I should be using. And then, with that in place, basically just stuck it together, hold it for a second, and there you go. One caveat about this surface mounting is sometimes if you have a magnet-to-magnet connection like this, and they're really strong magnets, and you allow them to slam together, they'll snap and they'll hit with such force that they'll cause that to separate, because basically it's just a flat piece of magnet. You can't rough up the magnet too much in order to give it a place to adhere, right? So I've had a couple magnets came off. This is actually the second time I tried to make this video. The first time I let that snap together, and I actually just had to go back. This was the first arm that I did. I didn't use any zip kicker when I completed it. I just went back and glued it with the zip kicker, and it's literally, you hold it there for about that long, and it's affixed with the zip kicker, as opposed to regular, cure times for cyanoacrylate or super glue, where it would take much longer than that in order to form a decent bond before you want to let go of it. During which point, of course, you're always worried about, gluing your fingertips to it. And as long as I'm talking about AdMech, that's that guy, ready to go, ready to charge across the table with his flamer and wreck some face. I figured I would bring out another one of my magnetized guys, and basically, I magnetize the model, and then I prime it, and then I paint it, and some parts I'll paint on there, some parts won't. So this guy has his phosphor serpenta. That arm's magnetized. He's got his taser lance. I've also got a magnetized radium Jezzail, which he's able to shoot far away with. I usually run these guys with the taser lance. It's not that unusual, I suppose, for that model. But the other thing that you can do is, now this is another advantage of using the same pull to set that up, is then you can store these together. If you've got a pair of lightning claws or something, and you use this method here, right, then you'll end up with the same thing being able to stick together. You're going to be able to join, paired arms together. It makes it a little easier to find in your box when you're transporting your army. And put magnets in these arms too, and let the glue on those magnets dry, and then line them up and glued those to here, right? So now I can also run this guy in addition to an Ironstrider. I can run him as a Dragoon. I can run him as a Ironstrider Ballistarius. I'm not even going to try and say that correctly. So there's my twin Cognis laser cannon for that guy, and then that just pulls right off, and I can put his stuff right back on there. This is probably the only Skitarii that I will ever bother to do this with, because the Dragoons are just so expensive in terms of real money, that I don't want to mess around with trying to buy 6 in order to run them as Dragoons and 6 in order to run them as Ballistarius, because if you look at the size of that shoulder, it is kind of difficult to drill those holes. A little nerve-wracking. I'm not going to do that with, say, Rust Stalkers and Infiltrators, because the arms on those guys are just, tiny little spindly robot babies is what my son calls those guys. And they are indeed tiny and spindly. One note about the Kastelan robots that I discovered while I was working on them. Somebody else pointed this out on the AdMech page on Facebook, is that there are these indexes that are built into these things. So there's a tab here. I'll tilt this up a little bit here. There's a tab on the knee here, the knee joint, the thigh part of the knee joint. There are square tabs in the ankle joints, right? And then on the pelvis, there are these square tabs, and those go into marker holes, which are called out in the documentation, right? It says it there. So you point out that you're supposed to go there. So not on this guy. This guy is the stock, bone stock first stance in the instruction manuals to put these guys together. But in the other guy, I actually took those square tabs off the ankles and off of the hips, and I carved the tab off of these, which there's a slot in the knee pad, right, that basically sticks right into. And you get a full range of motion of this knee from, all the way up to against the knee to there. The ball joints in the feet, they go this way and forward and back. So I have him in kind of, I didn't bring him out, unfortunately, but I have him in kind of a almost sprinting thing. And you can, obviously, this requires that you've got a certain openness to the stance of the pelvis, right? But, I've got that other guy set up so that the one leg is, instead of being stretched this way, is, further back. You basically pose them any way you like. The difficulty is that getting them to stay still when you glue them. But another advantage of the Model Master rubber plastic cement that I utilize is that if you get that stance, and basically I just held it there for 30 seconds, I want to say, that's pretty much enough for it to cure, and I set that up. I did the legs first, right? So there was very little weight on them after I let go. And then, fortunately, the top of the pelvis is also sort of a hemisphere, and the inside of the chest cavity is also a relatively large hole. If we can get a picture of this, you can get an idea from this here. So there's a small tab that sticks up in the middle, but you get a decent amount of posability, both in terms of rotation and in terms of forward, backward, side to side, depending upon how much room you've got to clear those hips, right? Which is not a great amount on this model, but you can basically position this so that the pelvis is forward, and you could still tilt the torso backward if you wanted to. It's a great model. I really like the details. I'm not sure how much of a joy it's going to be to paint because of all the little rivets and stuff on it, but we'll see. It took me probably a good 3 or 4 hours to put 2 of these guys together with the magnetizing built in, right? So plan that if you've still got a box of these guys that you want to get on the table. All right. I hope everybody found this helpful. I just thought it would be useful for some of the AdMech folks that I've seen saying, how do you go about doing this? I'm going to throw it on YouTube, and then I'll throw up some links so people can see it. Thanks a lot, and have a great day, and Ave Omnicide.